undefeated WBA lightweight champion of the world, Tank Davis.
What is going on, fight fans? So it is time to predict using data and analytics and looking at all of the numbers pre-fight to determine what exactly was the pay-per-view numbers for Tank Davis versus Frank Martin. Now, you could be like, hey, this guy doesn't even know the real numbers. What am I doing here? I should just leave. He's predicting the numbers. Just so that you know, I predicted the Canelo Alvarez versus Munguia pay-per-view numbers to be at around 500,000 pay-per-view buys. I was right on the money. I predicted Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia to be over 1 million pay-per-view buys. I was right on the money. I predicted Crawford versus Errol Spence to be roughly between 650,000 to about 800,000 pay-per-view buys, and I was right on the money. So my ability to extrapolate these numbers and give you the actual pay-per-view number or close to the pay-per-view numbers is pretty high. Let's be honest. When I do these, they tend to be pretty accurate. I've also predicted the Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia one to be roughly around 200,000 to about 300,000 pay-per-view buys, but we have yet to see those numbers. So any numbers that exist out there for Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney are not the official numbers. So we don't know how much they did, but that is still my prediction, and we have yet to see that one be proven wrong or right. So now moving on to this one. This one's a little bit easier than the Canelo Alvarez one. Why? Because Canelo Alvarez already set the stage for this platform, for the Amazon Prime platform, and what we can see and what numbers come out of what we see, right? And even with the blurriness of that one, I still was able to get that one right. Let's see if I can get this one right. So Canelo Alvarez has better numbers in his pre-fight setup. Now, I don't count the Canelo Alvarez Oscar De La Hoya press conference, because that one, or the clip of the press conference where the security guard had to separate Oscar and Canelo Alvarez, I don't count that one because that one was obviously an anomaly, and that anomaly did not align with all of the other numbers for the press conferences. Like, there were 20,000 views, like 30,000 views for the press conference stuff, and then 1.1 million views for Oscar De La Hoya being separated from Canelo by security. So I didn't count that. I looked at that. I within context, I knew that that is a thing that just rallies people to watch. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's people watching with interest to pay for the pay-per-view. So that I kind of washed out as an anomaly, but I was still very aware of it, just in the context of everything put together, that can pull more viewers because there's some type of controversy. But either way, it didn't align with most of the press conference. Now, most of Tank Davis and Frank Martin's press conferences were pretty similar. They were in the 20,000 views and the 25,000 views, things of that nature. Now, the important thing, which is showing itself to be pretty accurate, is, of course, you got to look at the social media buzz. How much are they, the hashtags being used leading up into the fight? That's an important metric. But looking at the pre-fight kind of tentpole content, that is really a good determining factor for the fight itself, because most people that will watch the fight and are like going to pay for the pay-per-view, well, not most, but a lot of them tend to watch the pre-fight content like Gloves Off or 24/7 or All Access, right? So when you look at the All Access-ish or the Gloves Off, which is the new one for PBC with Prime, when you look at Gloves Off, you can see a number that can give you an idea of what the actual numbers will be. Now, it's not one for one, right? So if you see Gloves Off and they got 500,000 views on the first episode, and the second episode always drops off. So if they got 500,000 views on the first episode and then 300,000 views on the second episode, it does not mean that 500,000 people are going to watch it, or even 300,000 people are going to watch the pay-per-view. Also, bear in mind, we live in the piracy era, so we have to account for that. We have to minus because of that, right? So it's not ever going to be one for one, but it is very telling. Now, Canelo Alvarez was able to do 1.3 million, around 1.3 million-ish, in the millions, for Gloves Off episode 1 and Gloves Off episode 2. He did about 780,000. Now with Tank Davis, he did about 819,000 for his first episode of Gloves Off, and he did about 437,000 for the second episode. So roughly the same type of drop off we always see with these all access episodes, 24/7 episodes, Gloves Off, what have you. It's always higher for the first episode, lower for the second episode. So Canelo is edging Tank Davis in this pre-fight setup. Now, with this pre-fight setup, and knowing all of the numbers going into it and what Canelo was able to do, which was around 500,000 pay-per-view buys, we're going to obviously have to go lower than that. But I want to be as accurate as possible. So at least we know that our ceiling is 500,000 pay-per-view buys, and it's less. So we can't go past 500,000 considering everything that happened with Canelo Alvarez and the numbers that came out for the Canelo Alvarez fight. So what are Tank and Davis versus Frank Martin plus an undercard of David Benavidez? What did that do? With all the numbers, where they were Gloves Off, looking at the hashtags that were used, how much they were used during that time frame to see the buzz on social media, also including piracy, because that's part of boxing. Unfortunately, I'm going to say that they were able to do, in terms of pay-per-views, anywhere between 250,000 and 350,000, and if you want to stretch it, 400,000, but I'm going to say probably 300,000 as the average of all of this, right? As the center, right? 250 to 350, we're gonna go 300,000. It most likely did about 300,000 pay-per-views. What does this mean? This means that if this is the numbers that come out, and hopefully Prime, Video and PBC put it out, because they normally do put out the numbers. They put out the Canelo numbers. I'm expecting them to put out these numbers as well, unless they're politically trying to do something, who knows, but that's boxing, right? Politics is always involved, but hopefully they don't do anything crazy like that, like what Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney's numbers are, where they're trapped in this place where we'll never see them for some reason. Hopefully they put them out, and if they do, yes, it will be around 300,000 pay-per-view buys if my calculations are correct. Now, there are no numbers out there right now. Nobody has put out numbers. Nobody has put out speculation. Maybe there's some speculation numbers, but no one has put out the figure of 300,000 pay-per-view buys. So keep that in mind. We really look at these numbers and we really pull out accurate pay-per-view numbers from these pre-fight numbers. So hopefully this one is also correct. But one thing that people will probably say is, well, does this make Canelo Alvarez the face of boxing? Because Canelo Alvarez, without a dancing partner, was able to do 500,000, and Tank Davis, without a dancing partner, is able to do 300,000. Well, he did raise his base level if, in fact, he hit 300,000 pay-per-view buys. Because one, they're not on Showtime anymore, so that marketing power of Showtime, it doesn't exist. So because the marketing power of Showtime doesn't exist, where there's just a brand awareness, right? There's a brand loyalty, brand awareness that people have with Showtime boxing. That's no longer there. That gave them a little bit of a bump. Without that, Canelo's able to pull out 500,000, and without that, Tank is able to pull out 300,000. I think that's actually a good sign, because Tank used to do around 250 to around 270,000 pay-per-view buys without a dance partner. So if he's fighting against Hector Garcia, he's doing 270. If he's fighting Rolly Romero, he's doing 280. He's always floating in that area for people that aren't well known. Now, if he starts moving into well-known fighters, for example, if his next fight is against Lomachenko, that can go up substantially because he's already moved his baseline up from fighting Ryan Garcia, right? If his next fight after that is like a Devin Haney or Teofimo Lopez, right? What ends up happening is he's going to keep raising his baseline and maybe eventually overtake Canelo. But I do believe that at this point right now, based off of the numbers that we're probably going to get from this fight, Canelo Alvarez is still the face of boxing. Now, I was one of the people that felt that Tank was probably the face of boxing, but looking at how these numbers came out, it might not be the case, which is, you know, I would rather it be Tank because Tank is on the up and coming kind of face of boxing and he's doing really fun fights where he's knocking people out, while Canelo is more like brand awareness, already established kind of person who's you know, not fought Benavidez. But then again, to be fair, you know, Tank hasn't fought the other guys either, right? He's not fought the Lomachenkos, he's not fought the Teofimos or the Shakur Stevensons or the Devin Haneys, but hopefully he starts that route, and I think that he will. And I think that if he continues that path, he can overtake Canelo at some point. So that is my thought. That is my prediction. 300,000 pay-per-view buys. Technically anywhere from 250 to about 350 and pushing it to 400. But I'm going to go ahead and say 300,000 pay-per-view buys for Tank Davis versus Frank Martin, which is a good thing considering all the previous fighters that weren't dance partners and how much he was making with them. He's raised his baseline with unknown fighters, with the casual market. If you want to see me break down the fight of Tank Davis versus Frank Martin and what I thought about that spectacular finish with Tank Davis, go ahead and click the video right here, and I'll see you in that video. Peace out, guys.